All right. All right. Time to get started on the V-Ray render assignment. So, continuation from the other video, if you've already seen it, actually making the board, trying to organize all the things, making the sections, and etc. etc. One of the main things, part of the additional assignment for this Monday, is the V-Ray render assignment, which, if you're looking at the modules, you've already seen the examples of. So I'm just going to show you how to actually do that. And one of the main things, of course, is, well, first, have your model done. Second is have V-Ray installed. If not, you can just use the computer lab downstairs and, well, render out the assignment. So first and foremost, we're going to need a perspective. I explained it before in the class. I'm just going to choose this perspective right here. If you don't remember, the name view right here is the camera icon. If you have multiple perspectives saved, you can just double click it and it'll go to it. This file, if I do show, I have the other things hidden. That's why the perspective is on here. But let me undo the show. I'll make a new perspective right now just for this one. Which I'm gonna do. Let's say this looks good. So all I have to do is click this plus icon, name it example perspective. For you, this is your own personal stuff. Only you see this on your own Rhino file. This is keep you in check on what keep things organized, basically. So I have my perspective saved, and which is going to be important to save the actual layers later on. If you don't have the actual name views, you can just type out named views in the command line, and once you click enter in that, it should show up as well. I'll show up here on the taskbar. Oh, one of the main differences between your guys' Rhino and mine is yours is you guys' are going to be to the right side of the actual Rhino file or Rhino. If you do want it to the top like mine, you just click the settings and literally just click vertical. And I don't like the vertical. I just change it to horizontal personally. That's why I have it like this. To me, it's easy to read. A little tip. Of course, if you want to add the sun icon, you can just type in sun and it'll pop up. This is going to be important to where if you want to change the sun in Rhino, because there's two options. You can either change the sun in Rhino, which is right here, using the sun command, and it'll pop up. Of course, make sure you turn on the sun and menu control so you can edit the actual orientation of the sun itself. Or, what you're going to move on to right now, is open up V-Ray. Hold on. Okay. So if you don't have V-Ray and you don't remember how to actually get V-Ray on top of on this taskbar, you go to render on the top and then current render, and then you select V-Ray for Rhino. Once you selected that, V-Ray should pop up right here. And then once you have it popped up, you open up the asset editor. And here is where the magic happens. So to actually start rendering, I have already a few materials on here. I was messing around just to get different types of things. Don't worry about this right now. There's going to be a separate video on how to actually apply this material because we're running out of time. And we need to work on you guys' portfolio, at least some critiques, at least. But you won't see this right now, or these. If you do have the clipping plane on, you can actually show section, how to say it, section cuts of the overall model while rendering it. But that's up to you to choose to do that if you want. But the main thing we're here for is once you open up the asset editor, I always typically expand this to the right. But first, go to the settings, and one of the main things we have to change is the render output. I say this many times. I say this many times that it's always, for me personally, going to be 1920 by 1080. But you're going to notice whenever exporting all these images with a view capture to file, you type in the command view captured file to export the images. The moment you increase the scale, this big old number 2, by default it's 1, and you're going to notice right under it, it says 1920 by 1080. If you don't want to resize the overall image in Photoshop once we get to that step, and of course you want the higher quality of this, see, it's going to go up in increments. If I do 3, if I do 4, it's going to get higher and higher quality. All you have to do is whatever the scale output is. So right now, if I were to do scale 4, it's 7,680 by 4,320. So this value right here, I'll have to put right here. So 7,680 by, it'll automatically fill it in by this by itself. But of course, the only downside for this is it's going to take longer to render. The higher value increase, the longer it is going to take to render. Of course, the quality is also going to affect it as well. So that's why I typically do 1920 by 1080, because it's quick and it does look good. But if you want to do 1380, let's just do 3,840 by 2160. Okay, so now that we have our render output, we're going to know that these two should, in Photoshop, match up without having to resize anything once we get to that step. So we got this out of the way. Next step is camera. So exposure value. I told you before, the ranges I typically use is 12 to 14, sometimes 11. I'm not sure if I should mess with this, it might be default, but that's one thing to look out for. That's how we'll mess with the values once we get to it, but for now, let's actually view capture file some of the actual things. I'm gonna minimize this, and let's go to our first one, which is technical. So this is the first one you want to view capture the file. So once we go to technical, we go to view capture the file. 1920 by 1080. Make sure transparent's on. Uncheck these 3 unless you want it. I advise not to. Scale 2. Remember this value. Oh, everything's set. Okay. Now I'm just gonna save it. I'm just gonna put it into the digital file. I'm just gonna name this Tech 1. So be it. Save. We have our first image saved. So now, the second one is typically the ghosted one. And what's special about the ghosted one is it's mainly highlighting what you want to represent within the model. So I typically do the armature, and I'll still do the armature. So first and foremost, I keep things organized. I put the layers down here so that I always have the layers open. Of course, to go to the layers, make sure it's like the pie looking one, red, white, and blue. So if you keep your model organized, all I have to do is just turn off the linear elements and turn off the planes. And there you go. That's my entire armature right there, set in stone. Easy as that. If you don't have it organized, you're going to have to click it, hide, etc. Just get this image alone. Or you can just select the armature itself and isolate it. Isolate. And I'll just give you an example right here. I can turn everything on, right-click armature layer, select objects, and I'll select everything within that layer. And then I'll just type ISO. I'll hide everything else, and only show the armature or what you've selected. And if I do unisolate, it'll unisolate everything. But let's undo that. This is what I want. If you do want to change the color of the actual ghosted, you don't need to. You can do it in Photoshop, but let's try colors. Do brown. Right now it's not working for me because as a material, let's change that material back to physically based. Oh, you have to go over here and change the default material. There you go. And since I added a material to it, just changing the layer color is not going to work out for it. So I have to change the color right here, which brown. Click apply, and it's still not changing. By layer. That's interesting. Can I take off the material? Display properties. Let me check something. Boom, boom. Oh, okay. Single layer, the object's color. There we go. So if you want to know what I did, I go to display options, display properties, I mean. I typed it in the command on the command line, and it's going to be the TV screen. I edit the ghosted settings since we're in ghosted view, right? I click the edit button, and right here where it says color and material usage, it's typically says single color for all objects. I have it like that so that I don't have to mess with the colors. Nothing changes throughout the entire project. But of course, if you select object's color, whatever the color of the object layer itself, it'll change that layer. It'll change the layer of the material. And since I did object's color, there you go. Another thing about the ghosted settings is you can actually change the transparency of the ghosted settings. So if I did like 10, it might be the opposite. If I did 90, yes, it's the opposite. If I did 90, it gets more transparent. But what was it at 20? I'm just going to leave it at 20 for now. Click OK. So now that we have a single color, let's say that was the color I wanted, right? Let's see if this changes. Yes. So let's go for greenish like this. Okay. So with this green right here, the overall experiment for it is through, of course, view capture file. So to actually make sure you're on the right perspective, because you're gonna have to make sure you're on the same perspective, or else if there's a slight shift, then it's not gonna line up basically. So make sure your perspective is lined up with everything else. So now we have this ready. All we gotta do is view capture the file. Oops, view capture the file. Make sure everything's good. 1920 by 1080 scale. Click OK. I'm gonna name this ghosted. Ghost. So now we have our two things set up. Now we're ready to render. So rendering now. Let me unisolate. Show everything else. Gonna move that back. I'm just gonna leave the same color. You can see the armature behind it. Is to start rendering. So we go back to the asset editor, open that back up, and you gotta remember, interactive render is live rendering. You're gonna see everything is messed up. I think I remember why actually. This file got corrupted. I think I duped it over. Let me turn on this setting and see if it'll fix everything. Okay, there you go. So material override will, because if you saw what I had before under materials, I have pearl black, white, and white floor. I had that applied to my my model, to each individual thing, and since it's been a while since I used Vray, you can see right here where my mouse is. It's not looking at the texture correctly, so that's why it looked like that. But the setting I turned on. Sorry about that. So throughout this, what was I saying before? I got interrupted. The material override, yeah. So with the material override, it's in the name. It'll override any material that is currently applied to the model. It overrides it with whatever color you want. You want it white. There you go. Now it's white. Ew, that doesn't look. Ew. I actually never touched that setting. Let's go back to color. Please? Okay. I thought it wasn't going to change. But typically with color, you're going to see it's like grayish a bit. You can up the ant of it and then make it more white, so it can shine out more. I don't know if you go, yeah, not too white, but you're going to see it's looking better and better. All right. Now we have that set up. Material override checked off if needed. Render output, same as the view capture the file. And of course, exposure value. So right now it does look kind of good, but if I do change it to, let's say, 13, We get that darker tone if you want. 12. Looks good. Let's do 0.5. I think 12 is fine. So stick with 12. Because right now it's looking good, but it might change the moment we start messing with the sun settings. So, sun settings. You can either mess with it in Vray or in Rhino. It's going to do the same thing. You're going to see on Rhino, if I move this, it's going to move it over here. So, up to you. Doesn't matter which one. It's your preference. I typically, well, to me, it's whatever's closer at the moment, and Vray is closer. So, and let's start adjusting sun to get the perfect sun. This will rotate around your model. And then this is how the angle of the sun will go into your model. So if I put it to 90, it is currently directly above my model. If I put it to 0, of course, it's like a sunset. The sun setting and everything. So that's how the sun works. But one major setting we want to change is filter to override. We do this because I don't want to see the actual color of the sun itself, because the sunrise is going to be orange. I don't want to see that within the model. You want those sharp, nice black and white lines, and override helps with that. So I'm going to go back to top view. You're going to see perfect shadows with there, rendering out, and I'm just going to mess with it more. Maybe you want that contrast. Maybe one side of the model is completely dark and the other side is completely light. It's up to you. But right now it's just playing around. I'm just going to say, well, this is perfect. Is it? If I increase the intensity. It's a lot of playing around with this. Now let's say this is good. This is what I want to show for the portfolio. Not realistically, I'm just showing for an example, but let's say this is the one. I'll stop the render, stop the interactive render, and then now the teapot itself with no green button on it is the actual render button. And from here, on the bottom of the screen where my mouse is, it says rendering. Now, depending on your computer, this could either take forever or it might take a couple of moments. This is depending on what quality you set on the settings here on the Vray asset editor. So if you set it on this setting, this higher quality setting, is going to take a little longer because, of course, there's more pixels to render out. So, and another thing, if you change the quality to high or even higher, is going to take even longer because there's a thing called denoising. Denoising is all these, if you can see it, we call this, all these pixelated parts, noise. And you see, it just went away. That was a really great timing, actually. It just denoised it. It made it flat and then made the pixels go away. That was a really good example right there. And of course, if you expand that out, there's all these little meticulous things. I don't need to go over it. Just put it on high. It should fix all your problems. And right now it's finished. You're going to see on the bottom it says finished. So at this point, we can just export it out. And the big old export button is this floppy disk. I click on it once. Save it on intro. Save it as render 1. Now we have all three of our... Oh, computer? Okay. Now we have all three of our images. So let's open up Photoshop. Hopefully by now everybody should have Photoshop. Most of you are Intro 2, so you guys should. But for the people who don't, the Creative Cloud should have allowed you to actually be able to use it. I hope. If not, you're just going to have to use the computer lab, unfortunately. All right. Now, of course, by default, you can just click on New File, type out 16 by 32 or whatever settings you want. Or what I do with stacking images is I click on File, top left, and then I go to Scripts. And from Scripts, I'll load files into Stack. What this does is it will take all the images you selected, if I can find it. So I click 1, I click 2. You can hold Control to select them at once. And once I selected the 3, it's going to load all these files into one Photoshop file stacked on top of each other. It's as easy as that. Once I have all 3 of them selected, I just click OK. And now since I did change the values from Vray, you're going to see right now it didn't match up right now. And I might know why. But you're going to see it still didn't match up. So that could be a field of view issue. And what I mean by that is if I go back to Vray, let's go back to interactive. And I forgot what keybind it is. If I hold control, yes. I might have done it by accident before recording this video, but if you hold control and you use your mouse wheel to scroll in, it'll actually zoom in a bit. So that could have been an issue. I might have zoomed in, and now it's not gonna match up to my, or it's still gonna match up. I'm just gonna have to transform it now. It's just extra work, but since I zoomed in and out, it doesn't match up perfectly anymore because it shifted. So because of that, I'm gonna have to go in Photoshop, click on the layer itself, so render 1, and once you click the layer itself, make sure you go to the selection, which is the very top command, and you're gonna see the blue box. Make sure show transform controls is on. If you have it off, you're not gonna see the blue box. So once you turn it on, you're gonna be able to see it. And let me move the ghosted view right under it so I can see better. And from here, I'm just gonna lock ghosted and technical view so that they don't move by accident. The lock button locks the layer, of course, so it doesn't move. And now from here, I'm just gonna shrink it. You can just click and drag it. You don't have to hold any button on the keyboard. It's a little annoying, but so be it. It's all part of the process. Is that perfect? No, I need a little bigger. Going out makes it bigger. Oh my gosh. All right. So now I'm just going to say this is quote unquote perfect, but let's say everything's matched up perfectly. So the rule of thumb is you can hold and drag this layer, and I want technical view to be on top because technical view is going to be all the information hidden behind the actual model. And what I want to do with technical view is you can click on the locks themselves and unlock them, and click on technical view, make sure you have the layer selected, change the opacity to be transparent. You don't want technical view to be too harsh on the overall model. Of course, you want your model to read like a model, right? So that's why we want technical view to be a lower opacity than the rest of it. And then ghosted view is going to be in the middle. Of course, same thing as technical view. I'm going to lower the opacity. Lower the opacity to get what I want. And if you want to add a black background, oh, that's Steam, sorry. Let me actually exit out. So, if you actually want a black background, you can make a new layer, which is this black and plus sign, and then go to your bucket tool. For you guys, it'll show this on a new Photoshop. But if you right-click it, and then click, of course, the paint bucket tool, and change the color, which is this one right here, my mouse is hovering over, and then change to black. Now click on the black at the screen. Oh, everything's gone. Until I move it to the bottom, and then there we go. Oops. I don't want to rotate it, but now I have a rendered out model. Now, if you want to change the overall color of the actual ghosted view without having to do it in Photoshop, you can actually, this might be difficult. This is extra steps. This is what you would turn into me right now. using the shadows. I can see everything right now. You've used technical view and everything. If you want the invert of it, thing to note, click on the technical view layer and do Control I, and it'll invert it and actually do black to white. That's something to keep in mind. But preference, which one reads better is up to you. I think right now the black one reads better. What happens if I increase the quality? Oh no. Let's keep it like that. I kind of like white now. There you go. And I don't think green is the best color because it's not glossy. You can change the gloss in Rhino. Oops. You can change the gloss in Rhino, if you remember, in the ghosted properties. TV screen, edit ghosted, gloss 50. And I'll change everything. If I do 100, it doesn't change that much, but it's something. It adds a little bit of detail, but that's how you can change the gloss of it. And from here, that's looking a little too strong. I'm just getting a little critiqued. Oh yeah. So with ghosted view, if you want to change the color in Photoshop without having to actually go back to Rhino, view capture the file, you can use this selection tool, which is the magic wand right here. It's W on the keyboard for a shortcut, and select around the model. You're going to see, since I'm on this layer, around the model is blank. It'll get the outline of it. If you right click and then select the inverse, now all you have is the interior of the ghosted view, the block of it. From here, if you make a new layer, I press G for the bucket tool, or I can just come over here and click it. Now, if I change it black to a new color, let's say we do purple, we just click on the bucket tool. Oh, I didn't even select it. So purple, please. Okay, purple, and I select it now. Now you're going to see that the purple is shown instead of the actual green color itself. And what another thing you can do, if you Control D will deselect it, select the two, and then you can start messing with the overall overlay of it and start getting these different types of textures within the model itself. And this one's color burn. It's mixing the green and the blue with it, and it does this kind of effect to it. There's color dodge, there's lighter color, screen, but this one kind of looks nice actually, like linear burn. But then we have multiply, which will combine the two if I remember correctly. But now you're starting to see that the green has become stronger at least. But it's something to play around with. This one is like this looks like a modeling something, clay. But let's say let's stick with this one. Now I can see the armature right there. Then I'll combine the two. So if I select this layer and then hold Control and select this layer, and I right click, I can merge these layers. Now they become one layer. And from here, I'll just lower the opacity and start messing around with it. It's all playing around in Photoshop. It's all showing your creativity. But there you go. This is one of the things you can do within Photoshop. Then you'll save. I'm not going to save it. I don't want it on my computer. But after you save it, go to File, Export, Export As, and save it as a PNG. Save it as a PNG if you don't want the black background. Turn off the black background and save it as PNG, and then you'll have a floating model itself. And then click Export. And then this is the entire render assignment. I know some people, if I remember correctly, let me stop the interactive render so my computer's not killing itself. How to actually do the sections within the model or within Rhino. The way to do it is actually just using the clipping clipping section. Of course, select the model itself, press enter, and then let's say this is the perfect section place. Let's go to shaded. Oops. Oh. Go to shaded. Ghosted view looked better. Okay, let's just stay in ghosted. And then at this point, you're like finding the perfect section. Maybe it's this way. I'm probably gonna get too nitpicky. Let's say this is the perfect section, right? How would I go about putting this and exporting it? So if you guys remember the Z, Y, and X, Y, Z coordinates, right now I'm facing Z and Y. So I just have to find the same coordinates right here, Z and X. So that wouldn't be the coordinates I want. But if I do want to add one that's Z and Y, I can make a new layout. No, not layout. I can split horizontal, change that layer, set view. It might be, no, not front. It is, let's try left. You can see it's ZY, but it's the opposite way. We want it, the Y going to the right. So if it's not left, then it has to be right. Right, there you go. And you can see if I open this one, that the clipping section is not actually affecting this view. If I select the clipping section and go to the color wheel for properties, right now only the perspective is checked off. We want to check off the right view, which is this one. And now it does affect this one. If I change this to ghosted, well, now you're going to see the actual section. And from here, you can just hide the clipping plane. And then if you want to do an infill in Rhino, which I'll advise to, if I go to Arctic, I already have mine filled in. But if you don't remember how to fill it in, you can just go to options. And that's not the options. Just go to the display settings. So if you type in display properties, command line, click edit Arctic settings, expand on Arctic since we are on Arctic view. Go to Arctic objects and then clipping planes since that was a clipping plane we just messed with. And then this one is the one we're going to have to mess with. Show fills. If it's grayed out, I think you have to uncheck this one right here, the top one. And from here, you can just make it darker right now. If I move it to the side, if I do red, click OK, it turns it red. But black, straight up black, and you're not going to see everything. There you go. You're going to see the fill is entirely black now. And then from here, of course, you capture the file. I'll save it. Section 1. And if you are doing it within layouts, so let's do layout. The page layout should be arc-C, Rhino PDF, size arc-C. It should be portrait. Click OK. And then there we go. We have our layouts right here. It should be in the other video, but you should be able to drag images if needed to if you are doing it in Rhino. Put it as a picture. Boom, boom. There you go. And just move it around. If you need to make it bigger, click on the blocks and then hold Shift. And there you go. That's one of the requirements right here, section 1. That's one way of doing it, or the other method, of course, is in the other video. If you do detail, add, let's do right perspective, click, since this is the right perspective, double click in it to actually affect it. Let's go to Arctic. You're gonna see it's not affected right now. So if I go to the clipping plane, I think I hit it. Show. I unshowed it. You can either type in show and it'll show everything. I'll select it, go to properties, and you're gonna see layout space. Okay, and since we called it arc-C, our layout, we only have one detail in there right now. which is, well, this one right here. And then since this is the first detail, and once I check it off, there you go. That's one way of actually getting the clipping planes in here without having to mess with anything. I think another method is you should be able to just drag it in here, remember? That's one of the new updates where they just dragged it in. Because they just did this. It's not working for me right now. But before, you could just drag it and it'll affect everything. Oh, okay. You might have to be inside of it. So if I double click within this view, drag section in there, yeah, you can just do that as well. So if I duplicate this view, hold Alt and then drag it, duplicated it, double click within it, drag this right here, well, we have our first perfecto shot. I'll save you the hassles of actually messing with everything. There you go. But that's practically all. See you guys Monday. And bye-bye.